On Christmas Eve, I showed up at my daughter's home without warning and found my granddaughter huddled outside in 10-degree weather, dressed only in a sweater and leggings. Inside, the entire family was gathered around the festive table, savoring ham and chatting in the cozy glow. Furious at their cruelty, I smashed through the door and spoke 5 words that drained the color from their faces. But that was merely the start of the reckoning that transformed their existence permanently. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to the channel and share in the comments what time it is in your location right now. My phone vibrated against the steering wheel. A message from my old friend next door: spotted cop vehicles at the Miller's place once more. Family dispute. Reminded me of your ongoing concerns with your kin. I gazed at those lines as my weathered Ford rumbled in the garage. The Millers. Evelyn used to fret about their granddaughter as well, back when she was still with us, able to care about such matters at all. These days it was only me and that persistent ache in my stomach every time I pondered Sophia's union. The dashboard clock showed 2:45 p.m. Time to head out. I shifted into drive and pulled onto Elm Avenue. Sleet had begun an hour earlier, sharp pellets that clung to surfaces and turned the paths slick. The radio hissed with storm alerts as I merged onto I-90 east toward Cleveland, a folk music station, the very one Evelyn and I tuned into regularly. Bob Dylan crooned something somber that echoed my disposition. The front seat cradled 2 wrapped packages, one containing a fresh soccer cleats for Mia, top-quality material that set me back more than I'd planned. The other held adventure novels, the type with daring explorers she'd devoured since she was 11. At 17 now, she might figure she was beyond them, but I recalled being 17. You're never beyond inspiration. Kin is the only thing that endures, Evelyn would remark when she overheard me complaining about seasonal get-togethers. She'd been spot on then, and she remained so, though her words lingered only in my recollections. Following her passing 8 months prior, each reunion seemed invaluable and delicate, like fragile glass that could shatter with the slightest mishandling. The wipers battled the gathering sleet. Vehicles inched forward at reduced speeds, emergency flashers pulsing like anxious beacons in the dim light. I gripped the wheel firmly and held a consistent 35 mph. Better to arrive safely than not at all wrapped around a guardrail. Highway markers ticked off the distance to Cleveland. I attempted to ring Sophia's residence, aimed to inform them of my approach, perhaps soften the impact of my sudden appearance. The line trilled 7 times before voicemail kicked in. Odd. Typically, the house bustled on Christmas Eve afternoon. A convenience store emerged through the haze, its neon signs piercing the overcast day like a signal fire. I steered in, topped off the fuel, and stepped indoors for hot tea and a pack of those mint candies Mia favored. The attendant, a middle-aged woman with weary lines around her eyes, nodded at the worsening conditions. Paths are deteriorating fast, she commented, ringing up my purchases. Heading far, just to Cleveland. Holiday supper. Drive safe. Heard of 4 wrecks so far today. Returning to the vehicle, I glanced at the time once more. 3:20 p.m. The trip normally spanned 50 minutes, but today it had stretched to nearly 90. I pictured Mia likely assisting her mom in the kitchen, perhaps viewing a holiday special with Victor. The girl had matured tremendously since autumn when we'd hiked near Lake Huron. She'd spotted her first deer that outing beamed as if she'd discovered treasure. That's when I'd spotted the mark on her leg. When questioned, she'd gone silent, mumbled about tripping during a run, but the blemish seemed off. Too defined, too reminiscent of a grip. I ought to have probed deeper, demanded answers. Evelyn would have sensed the right approach, her intuition always sharper in such moments. The sleet persisted as I exited at ramp 12 toward Sophia's district. Residential lanes bordered by split-level homes, each adorned with wreaths and winter garlands. Festive illuminations already adorned several, sparkling amid the icy veil. I navigated into Oak Ridge community, proceeding cautiously past dwellings where clans were doubtless assembled at meal tables, exchanging tales and serving platters. Inviting radiance poured from panes, casting amber shapes on frosted yards. This was meant to be a joyful occasion, a mending one. Evelyn would have insisted on that, her spirit always leaning toward reconciliation. Sophia's road loomed ahead, and I spotted her dwelling at the cul-de-sac's end. The gray split level with black trim Victor's SUV parked beside her minivan. Vapors wafted from the vent and seasonal ornaments graced the entryway. All appeared ordinary, serene, even as if no storm raged within or without. I eased the vehicle as I neared, envisioning the astonishment on their expressions when I rapped at the entrance. Perhaps Mia would dash to embrace me as in her younger days. Maybe this Christmas Eve would mark the commencement of mending our bonds just as Evelyn had envisioned in her quieter reflections. I maneuvered into the drive behind Victor's SUV, the motor humming as it settled. Amid the descending sleet, I noted holiday glows flickering near the threshold and detected soft carols emanating from within, something comforting and beckoning akin to a classic postcard brought to vivid life. Then I noticed her. Mia perched on the entry steps, curled tight with her limbs drawn close. No jacket, no scarf, merely a light knit top and pants now coated in ice. Her frame quivered not solely from the chill, but from an inner turmoil that cut deeper than any frost. "Good Lord," I whispered, flinging open the vehicle door. The gust assaulted me like a blow bearing frozen shards that pricked my skin. In the brief instance to reach her, I observed her mouth tinged violet, and her palms clenched against her torso, striving to hold on to fleeting heat. "Mia!" I shouted, hastening across the treacherous pavement. "What on earth are you doing out here?" She lifted her gaze, and the solace in her expression nearly shattered my resolve. Her complexion was ashen, nearly spectral, with crimson blotches on her cheeks, where the bite of winter had struck fiercest. "Grandpa." Her tone emerged as a faint murmur, teeth clattering so fiercely she struggled to articulate. I can't." I was already shedding my thick parka, draping it over her form, before she could elaborate. The girl felt like solid ice, her entire being shuddering like a branch in a gale. "What do you mean, you can't? What?" I aided her to rise, bracing her as her knees almost gave way. "How long have you been exposed like this? I'm not permitted." She drew my parka closer, and I sensed her tremors through the dense material. "I'm not permitted inside the home." The statement struck me like a hammer. In the background, through the illuminated windows, I heard merriment and the murmur of a broadcast. The inviting aura of kin revelry while my granddaughter endured the elements like a form of retribution. "What do you mean, not permitted?" My words emerged harsher than planned, but fury was igniting in my core like a blaze. "This is your residence." Mia recoiled at my sharpness, and I swiftly mellowed it. The least she required was yet another grown-up raising their voice. "Please don't worsen it for me," she murmured, eyeing the entry nervously. "Please, Grandpa, if Victor overhears." I surveyed the dwelling, truly examined it. The adornments, the welcoming beams, the echoes of festivity. Then I regarded my granddaughter, lips azure and quaking in attire, unfit for 40-degree, let alone this Arctic ordeal. "How long, Mia?" I maintained a tender yet resolute tone. "How long have you been out here?" She avoided my stare. Since early this morning." This morning I consulted my timepiece. 3:30. "Child, it's sub-zero out here. You could suffer hypothermia. I halted before alarming her further. I tested the entry knob, secured. Naturally, it was barred. They'd excluded her from her own abode on Christmas Eve and abandoned her to the freeze while they indulged in their celebration meal. "We must warm you up," I declared, steering her toward my vehicle. "Come into the cab with the heater." Yet as I acted to shield her, my thoughts raced, documenting particulars. The manner she'd shrunk when I elevated my voice. The contusions I'd observed on our hike. The cautious gait she adopted, like one who'd mastered invisibility to evade peril. This wasn't isolated. This was a cycle repeated in shadows. "Mia," I uttered as I settled her in the passenger side and maximized the warmth. "I require you to recount precisely what transpired today." I blasted the heat fully and enfolded another throw from my safety kit around Mia's shoulders. Her fingers were so stiff she couldn't clasp properly. Thus I cradled them in mine, massaging life back into her digits. "Speak to me, kid," I urged, holding my timbre even amid the storm raging within. "What occurred this morning?" She fixated on her hands, still convulsing. "I was aiding Mom with the ham. She requested I monitor it while she dressed." Her voice was diminutive, laden with guilt. I simply... I neglected to reset the stove alarm when I removed it to glaze. You overlooked an alarm. The ham got somewhat charred on the surface. Not spoiled, just deeper in hue than expected. She met my eyes at last, and I perceived the dread there. Victor entered, and noticed, and he erupted. I sensed my jaw tighten. Erupted how began shouting about how I'd spoiled the entire occasion, claimed the visitors would judge Mom as inept in the kitchen, that I was a disgrace to the household. Mia clutched the throw firmer. Then he decreed I must reflect on my deeds and couldn't return indoors until I'd grasped accountability. And your mother. The query escaped sterner than meant. Mia averted her gaze. She attempted to intervene initially, but Victor ordered her to butt out. Said this was his domain with me. He gulped. She fell silent after that. I rechecked the clock. 3:35. Mia. What hour did this unfold? Around 10:30 this morning. 5 hours. 5 hours in conditions that could claim a life over a marginally scorched ham that likely flavored fine regardless. I drew multiple deep inhales before speaking sans bellowing. Has this recurred before? The inquiry suspended between us. I witnessed her grappling with disclosure, likely balancing the fallout of candor against the liberation of confiding. Occasionally she breathed when I err. Last week he forced me to remain in the shed overnight for overlooking the recycling, and once he confined me in the attic for 3 days for inadvertently shattering one of his wine glasses. Each revelation felt like a strike to my innards. I beheld my granddaughter, this bright, compassionate young woman who'd never harmed a soul, and noted the deliberate posture she maintained as if existence itself posed a threat, if not navigated with caution. Your mother is aware of this. She insists Victor's merely instilling order that I must become more diligent. Her tone fractured. Perhaps she's correct. Perhaps I'm just... Don't. I pivoted in the seat to confront her squarely. Don't you ever fault yourself for this. What that individual inflicts upon you isn't order. It's mistreatment. And it ends this instant. Mia's eyes widened in alarm. No, Grandpa. Please. If you escalate, he'll merely retaliate against me afterward. He invariably does. I glimpsed the dwelling through the glass, still radiating warmth and allure, still resonant with cheer and seasonal tunes. Indoors, my daughter was dishing out supper to attendees while her husband's stepdaughter endured in a vehicle too terrified to demand fundamental kindness. Hear me, I stated, clasping her hands anew. You are 17 years old. You needn't endure this any longer, and I won't permit it. But where could I reside? I lack funds. I can't fund education without... You'll accompany me home this evening. The resolve solidified as I voiced it. We'll navigate the remainder subsequently. I discerned the blend of aspiration and dread contending in her demeanor. Aspiration because perchance at last someone would advocate for her. Dread because she'd internalized that improvement was illusory. He won't allow my departure, Mia murmured softly. He'll summon authorities, allege theft, or that you're abducting me. I regarded the dwelling once more at the cozy illuminations and festive trimmings and sensed something frigid and unyielding lodge in my core. Evelyn had perpetually been the mediator, the one who diffused kin strife with forbearance and empathy. But Evelyn was absent now, and mediation hadn't safeguarded my granddaughter from 5 hours in lethal chill. Let me handle Victor, I asserted, opening the vehicle door. Presently, we're retrieving your belongings. I emerged into the sleet, my footwear grinding on the icy layer. Trailing me, I heard Mia hasten to keep pace. My parka still cloaked her form. The entry remained barred, but I harbored no plan to request entry. I drew Mia nearer, yet my limbs weren't merely quivering from the freeze any longer. They trembled with the sort of indignation that accumulates gradually, then collides like an avalanche when the full vista unveils. Why didn't you reveal it was this severe? I inquired, scrutinizing her features more intently. Now that I truly observed, I detected subtle discolorations along her neck, partly obscured by the dimness and frost-flushed epidermis. I attempted hints, she whispered, cinching my parka. But you always confer with Mom, and she... The recollection assailed me like a sting. Last fortnight, when Mia phoned amid my supper prep, her timbre faint and wavering. Grandpa Victor declares I can't join them for meals anymore. Says I must merit my spot at the table. I dismissed it lightly, deemed it adolescent theatrics. Contacted Sophia the following day, and she'd deflected with that honed poise she'd cultivated since wedding Victor. Dad, you're exaggerating. It's standard kin guidance. Mia amplifies all. Another reminiscence arose. Autumn call. Mia sounding drained. Mom Victor berated me again over unwashed plates. He compelled me to scrub every utensil in the residence thrice. When I'd queried Sophia later, she'd exhaled that victimized breath. He's merely theatrical. Victor's endeavoring to impart duty. How long has he been treating you thus? I posed, though a fragment of me knew the response would devastate. Since Mom wed him 4 years past. Mia's voice was scarcely audible. It commenced minor nitpicking how I arranged the laundry or positioned my backpack. Then it escalated. I recollected the hike this recent fall, how Mia had appeared hesitant to return persistently, inquiring if we might extend another day. When I'd urged her, she'd merely shrugged and claimed she enjoyed the trails. But now I viewed it afresh. The manner she'd quieted upon mention of homeward bound, the gloom that shadowed her when discussing term commencement, the attic episode I remarked fragments aligning. You alluded to resting in the shed. How frequently, more than I'd care to tally. She fixated on her palms now, and I perceived the humiliation she bore. Last spring he barred me out for neglecting to mow the lawn. I bunked in your vehicle during your Easter visit. My vehicle. She'd slumbered in my vehicle on Easter while I was indoors savoring coffee and presuming what a splendid kin gathering we enjoyed. The remorse struck like a tangible impact. I directed toward the dwelling where inviting light emanated from each pane, and I could discern faint chuckles. A flawless, suburban festive vista while my granddaughter verged on hypothermia on the entry steps. Your mother knows all this. Mia nodded despondently. She claims Victor's just molding me into a superior individual, that I must cease being so delicate and master regulations. The fury intensified now, scorching and pinpointed. I felt it in my thorax and how my sight appeared to hone and constrict. Evelyn used to caution about my ire. Advised counting to 15 before reacting when I reached this state. But Evelyn was gone and tallying wouldn't aid my granddaughter. I rose, still enveloping Mia in my parka. Come, we're entering. Grandpa, no. Please, if you provoke, he'll just... What I faced her completely. Compel you to slumber outdoors in Arctic conditions. Assault you, deprive you. I heard my tone harden. Child, it can't deteriorate beyond what's already transpiring. Mia gazed at the entry with terror in her eyes. You don't comprehend his reaction when defied. But I was already advancing toward the dwelling, my granddaughter trailing hesitantly. The entry appeared sturdy and lavish, Victor's vanity evident in every facet of his impeccable suburban stronghold. I forwent knocking. My foot struck the door adjacent the latch with all the might I could summon. 70 years of age, but years of construction labor had endowed me with greater vigor than many youths. The timber fractured with a boom that resounded through the vicinity, and the door crashed inward so forcefully it rebounded from the partition. The heated air surged out to greet us, bearing the aroma of baked ham and the abrupt hush of astonishment. I entered the foyer, Mia tight behind, and absorbed the tableau that halted me abruptly. The dining area was arranged like a spread from a periodical. Linen cloth tapers, glimmering glassware reflecting the luminescence. Victor presided at the table's end in a crisp collared top, slicing blade and grasp. Sophia flanked him in a red ensemble I'd not seen prior, her locks impeccably arranged. A younger boy, perhaps 9 years old, sat opposite with a spoon laden with stuffing en route to his lips. They were all immobilized in mid-action, as if time had paused on their idyllic festive instant. The disparity assaulted me like a corporeal strike. Here they lounged snug and content, relishing their banquet, while Mia had shivered externally for over 5 hours. The ham appeared luscious and ideal, likely the substitute for the one Mia had allegedly botched. All was immaculate, tranquil, precisely what a kin Christmas Eve ought to resemble. All save the reality they'd abandoned a youth to the elements. Have you utterly forfeited your senses? My voice thundered through the space, and the young boy let his spoon clank. Sophia's countenance blanched like parchment, and the ladle in her grip struck the surface, splattering sauce over the pristine fabric. Dad! Sophia's tone emerged as a peep. What are you doing here? How did you... While you're here, banqueting like nobility, that girl was icing outdoors. I gestured straight at Mia, who remained swathed in my parka and trembling despite the heat. 5 hours, Sophia. 5 hours in weather that might have slain her. Victor deliberately placed his slicing blade and stood from his seat. He was larger than memory served, likely outmassed me by 60 pounds, but I'd tangled with sturdier in my youth. Bulk didn't invariably prevail when wrath sufficed. Who granted you leave to invade my domain? His timbre was measured yet menacing, the inflection of a man unaccustomed to opposition. This is personal territory, and you're intruding. I could observe him appraising me, gauging if he could cow me into retreat. His torso expanded marginally, and he circled the table toward us with the stalking assurance of one who dominated his realm. Personal territory. I advanced to confront him. You refer to the territory where you barred my granddaughter outdoors to ice while you dined. The younger son began weeping, bewildered and terrified by the clamor. Sophia extended to soothe him, but her gaze never strayed from my visage. I discerned the turmoil there, divided between shielding her father and upholding her spouse. This is a confidential kin affair, Victor declared, his volume escalating. And you possess no role? No role? I sensed the flush mounting in my cheeks. That's my granddaughter you nearly dispatched with your confidential kin affair. Behind me, Mia drew nearer, and I felt her quaking, not from chill now, but from apprehension of the impending clash. This was likely the initial instance anyone had opposed Victor in his own abode, and we all sensed it was poised to turn volatile. The seasonal melodies still played faintly in the backdrop, some upbeat tune about thankfulness and kin unity. The sarcasm might have amused if I weren't so incensed I could scarcely think linearly. I directed at Mia, my digit firm, despite the fury surging through. Behold her, Victor. Truly behold what you've wrought. Victor folded his arms and elevated his chin, every bit the individual convinced of his rectitude. The girl botched our occasion. She required instruction on duty and repercussions. Instruction. I could scarcely credit my ears. You nearly iced a youth to demise over a marginally charred ham. She's 17, not a youth. And this is my domain with my edicts. Victor's tone assumed that condescending airmen employ when deeming themselves rational. I'm attempting to instill order, something her mother evidently neglected in her initial 16 years. Sophia winced at that, yet uttered naught, merely sat in her red attire, glancing between us as if observing a boxing bout rather than a struggle for her daughter's well-being. Order. I neared the table near enough to note the residue on Victor's dish, the cranberry mark on his mouth. That's termed youth endangerment, and you're fortunate I don't summon law enforcement this moment. Youth endangerment. Victor genuinely chuckled, a chilling noise that raised my hackles. She overlooked resetting an alarm and spoiled a $25 ham. I dispatched her outdoors to contemplate her deeds. That's not endangerment, that's guardianship. For 5 hours in 0-degree weather, she's dramatizing as ever. Victor dismissed with a wave like repelling an insect. Regard her. She's unharmed. A bit of chill never injured anyone. I regarded Mia, still enveloped in my parka, her lips violet and her form shuddering. Unharmed. This man deemed frostbite unharmed. Dad, please. Sophia at last interjected, her voice unsteady. Don't spoil our occasion. We can address this later as kin. Spoil your occasion. I pivoted to gape at my daughter. Your daughter was perched outdoors icing while you supped, and you're concerned about me spoiling your occasion. She stared at her dish, incapable of meeting my gaze. Victor was he was endeavoring to impart duty. Occasionally, girls need stern direction. Stern direction. My voice splintered with incredulity. Sophia, when you were 17 and you scratched my van, did I bar you outdoors in a sleet storm when you flunked your history exam? Did I compel you to slumber in the shed? That's dissimilar, she breathed. How? How is it dissimilar? Victor interposed between us, his countenance crimson with ire. Because this is my domain, and Mia is not my blood offspring. I hold every prerogative to guide her as I deem appropriate. There it was, the verity at last exposed. Mia wasn't his lineage, so Mia was insignificant. The girl was naught but a nuisance to be governed and chastised. You have 20 seconds to express regret to my granddaughter. I declared, my tone lethally subdued. 20 seconds to exhibit some fundamental humanity. Victor's chuckle was icier this round. I owe that girl zilch. If she dislikes my edicts, she can seek elsewhere to dwell. The young boy wept harder now, and Sophia issued calming sounds, but I scarcely registered them. All I perceived was Victor's complacent expression. All I contemplated was Mia on those steps for 5 hours, convinced she merited it. Elsewhere to dwell. I advanced nearer, close enough to detect the cider on Victor's exhalation. You're accurate on that. She is departing elsewhere to dwell. I delved into my coat pouch and extracted my mobile, my finger poised over the keys. The gesture was intentional, languid enough for all to grasp precisely what I contemplated. Victor's expression altered upon sighting the device. The smug assurance fractured faintly at the margins. Either you regret to my granddaughter this instant, I asserted, my tone lethally composed, or I contact youth welfare and report this mistreatment. You wouldn't presume. Victor neared, attempting to leverage his stature to daunt me. But I'd confronted mightier in my era, and I wasn't yielding to anyone who harmed my kin. Test me. I commenced dialing the initial digit. I've ample to relay about abandoning a 17-year-old outdoors in Arctic weather for 5 hours. Behind me, Mia seized my arm. I felt her quaking, but not from chill anymore. This was dread of another variety, the horror of one who'd learned that resistance only amplified woes. Dad, please. Sophia finally stirred, interposing with palms uplifted like halting a skirmish. Don't demolish our kin over this. I'm not demolishing aught. I kept my stare fixed on Victor. He accomplished that when he opted to mistreat my granddaughter. Mistreat? Victor's chuckle was sharp and acrid. I was imparting duty, something his feeble mother never troubled with. Sophia recoiled as if struck, yet she didn't defend, merely stood absorbing it, as she doubtless always had. Depart my domain, elder. Victor persisted, his volume ascending. You hold no sway here. Mia is my charge now, yea. Your charge? I surveyed the impeccable dining space, the crystal vessels, the fine porcelain, the festive focal point, then back at my granddaughter's marred visage. Is this how you manage charge? Barring youths outdoors to ice. The younger son wept harder now, perplexed and scared by the outcry. Sophia shifted to console him, but continued glancing between me and Victor, as if viewing a contest where fatality loomed. She's not a youth. She's 17. Victor stated, squaring his shoulders. And in my domain, grown-ups who can't adhere to basic directives face grown-up repercussions. Grown-up repercussions for overlooking an alarm. Grown-up repercussions for being negligent and ruinous for botching our occasion and humiliating kin before our invitees. Victor motioned toward the vacant seats where other relatives had evidently sat prior to my arrival. All had to depart due to the commotion she incited. I regarded those vacant seats and felt another fragment of the enigma slot in. They'd hosted guests. Folks had been there dining and mingling while Mia endured outdoors icing, and none had queried it, none had voiced a syllable. Grandpa, let's just leave, Mia whispered after me. Please, I don't wish to incite further issues. The resignation in her tone fractured something within me. This girl, this astute, benevolent young lady, had been subdued so thoroughly that she believed she was the issue, that she provoked trouble by seeking basic human decency. You're not inciting issues, kid, I proclaimed loudly for all to hear. You never were. I turned back to Victor, my resolve crystallizing like frost in my veins. You have 20 seconds to regret to my granddaughter for today's deeds. I'm not regretting aught. Victor folded his arms, chin elevated in defiance. And I'm assuredly not accepting commands from some resentful elder who can't accept that his cherished granddaughter required order. Then we're concluded here. I sealed the phone and returned it to my pocket. Mia, fetch your items. You're accompanying me home. The hush that ensued was profound. Even the young boy ceased weeping momentarily. You can't simply seize her. Sophia uttered, her tone scarcely a breath. Observe me. I positioned my palm steadfastly on Mia's shoulder, directing her from the dining area toward the stairs. Go gather what you require. We're departing. Dad, you can't execute this. Sophia trailed, her tone rising with panic. You can't just invade our domain and take my daughter. I can, and I am. I continued advancing, remaining between Mia and the others. Unless you'd favor I summon officials and let them resolve. Mia guided up the slender staircase to the upper level, her steps swift and uncertain. I could hear Victor aft his ponderous footfalls on the flooring, but I didn't pivot. This is abduction, Victor bellowed. I'll have you detained for abduction. Fortune explaining to Law why my granddaughter was perched outdoors in 0-degree weather for 5 hours. I attained the stair summit and followed Mia along a brief corridor to a compact chamber at the rear. The space was hardly sufficient for a single bed, and a modest chest, no ventilation grill visible, and the lone window-oriented west admitting the harshest winds. It resembled storage more than lodging, and it was evidently the least desirable room in the abode. This is where you rest, I queried, absorbing the minimal decor and blank walls. Mia nodded, already extracting garments from the chest and cramming them into a backpack. Victor says the lower room is for visitors and the other upper room is for my brother. I noted she didn't term him our brother, just my brother. Even in her own domicile, she was an outsider. Take all that signifies to you, I instructed, standing sentinel at the portal while she packed. We're not returning for aught. Mia, consider what you're doing. Sophia materialized in the portal, her face streaked with tears. This is your home, your kin. Some kin, Mia muttered, folding a Cleveland College hoodie into her pack. True kin don't bar each other outdoors to ice. Victor was just endeavoring to impart duty by endowing me frostbite. Mia gazed up at her mother, and I perceived 4 years of anguish and disillusion in her eyes. Mom, he compelled me to slumber in the shed last month because I left a mug in the basin. A mug. That's not ordinary. Sophia's expression crumpled. He has elevated expectations. He desires you to improve. He desires me vanished, Mia stated quietly, zipping her pack. And you know it. We descended anew. Victor awaiting at the base like a sentinel. You exit my domain, girl, and you don't return ever. Suits me, Mia replied, and I heard genuine fortitude in her tone for the first time that day. The entry still dangled ajar from my kick. Chill air flooding the abode and causing the festive trimmings to sway like wilting petals. I could see my vehicle in the drive motor idling, vapors evident in the frigid atmosphere. Mia Sophia called as we attained the door. Please don't execute this. I love you. She halted, turned back to regard her mother one final time. If you loved me, Mom, you wouldn't have permitted this. We proceeded to my vehicle in quiet, our exhalations visible in the freezing air. I tossed her pack in the rear and assisted her into the passenger side, then circled to the driver's. Through the front pane of the dwelling, I could see the kin still positioned in the foyer. Sophia sobbing. Victor flushed with rage, the young boy peering around the bend. Prepared? I queried, shifting into reverse. I've been prepared for 4 years, Mia stated, drawing my parka tighter around her shoulders. I backed from the drive and onto the lane past the other adorned dwellings, where ordinary clans were likely concluding their Christmas Eve meals in tranquility. The radio persisted with folk tunes. The heater functioned flawlessly, and for the first time since my arrival, Mia appeared able to truly inhale. Thank you, Grandpa, she said softly as we turned onto the primary route toward the interstate. I can't believe you arrived for me. I should have arrived sooner, I replied, intending every syllable. I should have perceived what transpired. I tried to convey, but I didn't know how. We drove in eased silence for several minutes, the familiar burden of kin duty settling around my shoulders like Evelyn's cherished Afghan. This girl needed safeguarding, needed a secure haven to recover and evolve into the person she was destined to be. Tell me about school, I said as we joined I-90 West. What are you pursuing, architecture? Her tone strengthened when discussing studies. Structural design like you did in construction, like grandfather, like granddaughter. I grinned, contemplating Evelyn, and how elated she would have been. We'll sort the fees. Don't fret about that. Grandpa, I don't want a burden. Kid, you're no burden. You're kin, and kin cares for one another. My drive appeared cozier than usual, with both vehicles aligned, but the house itself radiated invitation as we neared. I'd left the entry lamp on routinely, and now I appreciated that modest guide piercing the winter gloom. Home sweet home, I remarked, aiding Mia with her pack to the threshold. The lock turned smoothly and warm air greeted us as we entered. The abode scented of tea and the fading aroma of Evelyn's rose potpourri. It wasn't grand, a simple bungalow with faded furnishings and rugs that had known better times, but it was owned outright and it was ours. Recall the spare room, Chartis? I asked, illuminating as we traversed the den. Yes, along the corridor beside yours. Mia surveyed with evident relief. It's so toasty here. Thermostat at 70 constantly. Your grandmother always said existence is too brief to shiver in your own abode. I guided her to the spare and assisted settling, extra covers in the wardrobe if needed. The space was basic yet comfy. A full bed with one of Evelyn's Afghans, a chest, and a lounger by the pane. Images of kin assemblies adorned the walls, including various of Mia through the years. This had always been her spot on visits, and having her here now felt correct in a manner nothing had since Evelyn's departure. I'll prep some supper, I said. Nothing elaborate. Got fish in the freezer and some produce that needs using. Can I assist? She inquired, and I saw how eagerly she sought to contribute to justify her presence. Certainly, but you needn't. This is your home now, not employment. We collaborated in the kitchen, and slowly the day's strain eased from Mia's posture. I defrosted the fish in the microwave while she rinsed veggies, and we navigated around each other with the fluid sync of kin who'd prepared meals jointly before. Recount more about what's occurred, I said as I spiced the fish. Begin from the onset when your mother wed Victor. Mia paused. Lengthy, evidently deciding disclosure extent. It started trivial. Minor remarks on how I folded towels incorrectly or left my books astray. Then it magnified. How much he dictates everything. When I dine, what I dine, when I bathe, when I can text. Mia's tone diminished as she proceeded. He forced Mom to select between him and me. And she selected him. I had to pause spicing the fish momentarily and clutch the counter. What do you mean she selected him last Easter when you visited? Recall how I was silent at supper. Victor had decreed I couldn't speak unless queried directly, and Mom didn't intervene. The memory struck like a blow. I thought Mia was just typical sullen teen. I'd even jested with Evelyn later, saying youths nowadays lacked conversational skills. Why doesn't your mother oppose him? She's frightened. Mia began dicing potatoes with robotic accuracy. She confided once that leaving him means losing the home and returning to that condo block we once inhabited. She can't support us solo. I inserted the fish into the oven and kindled a blaze in the den hearth. The routine act of crumpling paper and arranging wood soothed my turbulent mind. Join me, I invited when the flames danced steadily. Share the positives. Share about classes, about your pals. We nestled into the plush seats by the fire, and for the first time that day, Mia smiled. I achieved honor roll last term. And I've this pal Alex who's instructing me piano. Your grandmother always yearned to master piano. I gestured to a framed image on the shelf depicting Evelyn at 22, grinning and cradling a keyboard. She said melody was the soul's dialect. I recall her saying that. Mia examined the image with fresh curiosity. I miss her. Me too, kid. Me too. We conversed until the fish finished exchanging tales of Evelyn and plotting Mia's upcoming term. The abode felt vibrant again with dialogue and chuckles as it had when Evelyn filled the silences. As we sat for our straightforward yet fulfilling repast, I looked across at my granddaughter. Truly looked. The fear had vanished from her eyes, supplanted by something absent for years. Optimism. We'll contact the school tomorrow, I said, slicing into my fish. Ensure your aid is arranged and we'll explore a side gig if you desire. Grandpa, you needn't do all this for me. Yes, I do. I met her gaze across the table. That's Kin's purpose. The phone trilled just as we concluded sweets. Remaining cake from the freezer. The noise sliced our serene evening like a blade, and I saw Mia stiffen instantly. I checked the ID and felt my jaw lock. Sophia. The tranquil popping of the hearth was disrupted by 3 firm raps at the entry, not the soft tap of a neighbor or the tentative knock of uncertainty. This was the commanding thump of one anticipating prompt obedience. Mia nearly spilled her teacup. Grandpa remained behind me, I directed, placing my cup and advancing to the door. The rapping repeated, more urgent, with multiple voices on my porch. I activated the entry light and peered through the viewer. 2 uniformed officers stood on my step, and behind them, like hunters poised, were Victor and Sophia. Mr. Ellis, the primary officer announced. Law enforcement, we must converse with you. I inhaled deeply and unlatched the door, positioning to obstruct their view of Mia. What may I assist with, officers? Victor promptly advanced, jabbing an accusatory digit. Officer, this man abducted my stepdaughter. He shattered our door like a felon and hauled the girl from her kin. The lead officer, a seasoned woman with fatigued eyes, raised her palm to hush Victor. Sir, we must clarify this matter. Mr. Ellis. Is there a young woman named Mia Reed here? Yes, I affirmed plainly. My granddaughter is present. He abducted her. Victor's tone escalated theatrically, smashed our entry and coerced the girl into a vehicle. Is the young woman here willingly? The secondary officer inquired, extracting a pad. Before response, Mia appeared beside, still draped in the throw from the sofa. Her tone was soft, yet distinct. I wish to remain with my grandpa. Victor's face reddened. See, he's crammed the girl's mind with falsehoods, turning her against her own kin. What falsehoods? I advanced slightly. The truth about how you abandoned her outdoors in Arctic weather for 5 hours. The truth about how you've mistreated her for 4 years. Mistreat, Victor chuckled, but it rang forced. I was imparting duty. The girl botched our whole Christmas Eve supper and needed to learn actions have consequences. The first officer glanced between us with the exhausted look of one who'd mediated countless kin quarrels. Mr. Ellis will need all to enter so we can discuss appropriately. I retreated reluctantly, permitting the officers into my den. Victor followed swiftly, Sophia lagging with eyes downcast. She appeared diminished, shrunken, like a woman who'd at last grasped the genuine price of her decisions. Now then, the officer stated, extracting her pad. Let's commence from the start. Mr. Reed, you allege this man abducted your stepdaughter. Undoubtedly. Victor squared his shoulders, donning what I recognized as his sensible authority act. I returned from errands to discover my entry broken and Mia absent. When I inquired neighbors, they reported seeing an elder forcing the girl into a vehicle. Forcing? I couldn't suppress the skepticism in my tone. Officer, I rescued my granddaughter from youth mistreatment. That's what he persists, Victor said, shaking his head sorrowfully. But verity is, he's never endorsed my union with his daughter. He sought any pretext to stir trouble. The officer turned to Mia, who stood near enough that I felt her quiver. Kid, did this man compel you to accompany? No, ma'am. Mia's tone was just above a murmur. He rescued me. Rescued from what? Mia glanced anxiously at Victor, then back. From icing to death on the entry porch. The second officer looked up from his pad. Elaborate. I inadvertently charred the ham this morning. Victor forced me outdoors in the cold to reflect on my deeds. I was there over 5 hours in 0-degree weather. She's amplifying, Victor interjected rapidly. It was perhaps 90 minutes, and she was attired warmly. 90 minutes, I gaped. Officer, I have testimony. My granddaughter was on that porch in a light top and pants when I arrived at 3:30. She'd been there since 10:30 morning. The first officer regarded Victor with fresh curiosity. Sir, is it true you compelled the young woman outdoors as penalty? Briefly, yes. But she's portraying it worse than reality in Arctic weather for hours. Victor's assured veneer began to fissure slightly. Look, sometimes adolescents need rigid order. Her mother and I concurred that... Mom didn't concur with aught, Mia declared, her tone fortifying. She just didn't halt you. All eyes shifted to Sophia, who'd been mute throughout. She stood by the portal as if prepared to flee, her hands clasped rigidly ahead. "Ma'am," the officer urged, "your account of events." Sophia resembled a woman at a precipice's brink, aware that her next words would decide retreat or plunge. Her hands trembled as she glanced between Victor's expectant visage and Mia's hopeful eyes. "Mrs. Reed," the first officer said gently, "we need the real occurrence today." Victor neared his wife, and I noted the subtle coercion in his stance, how he loomed the cautionary glare. "Tell them, dear. Tell how your father has tainted Mia against our kin." The officer noticed too. "Sir, please retreat and let your wife speak independently." I... Sophia's tone emerged as a breath. She cleared her throat and retried. "Mia did char the ham this morning," and the officer prompted, and Victor was furious, very furious. Her eyes darted to her husband, then away. "He said Mia needed to learn duty by sitting outdoors in Arctic weather." Sophia nodded wretchedly. "Victor said it would teach her caution." "How long was she outdoors, ma'am?" Another glance at Victor, rigid with suppressed ire. Since around 10:30. Until until my father arrived." Her tone diminished with each word. "Around 3:30. The officer calculated swiftly. "Over 5 hours in 0-degree weather." "She's portraying it worse," Victor interjected. "She could have entered any time with apology and remorse." "No, she couldn't," Sophia said abruptly, and all stared. "You secured the door. You instructed me not to admit her regardless." The ensuing silence was profound. Victor's face paled, then flushed, then paled. "Sophia," he said, tone perilously low. "What are you doing?" "I'm disclosing truth." She regarded Mia, tears forming. "For once in 4 years, I'm disclosing truth." The officer leaned forward. "Mrs. Reed has this penalty type occurred prior." "Yes." The word rushed out as if pent for years. "He's forced Mia to sleep in the shed in the attic. He's barred her outdoors overnight." Her tone strengthened with each admission. "He dictates when Mia can dine, when she bathes, when she can converse at meals." Sophia's silence. Victor's facade shattered fully. "You comprehend not what you're doing. You'll ruin all we've constructed. What we've constructed." She whirled on him with sudden wrath. "What have we constructed but terror and sorrow? Behold my daughter. Behold what you've inflicted on her." I watched Mia's expression transform as her mother finally advocated. 4 years of doubt and self-blame dissolved as she realized another saw the truth of her endurance. The first officer rose and approached Victor. "Sir, I'll need you to turn and place hands behind. This is absurd." Victor retreated toward the door. "You're arresting me on a resentful elder's word and his misguided daughter." "On physical proof and multiple aligning accounts of youth endangerment," the officer stated calmly, extracting cuffs. "You have the right to silence." As they recited rights and led him to the door, he turned to Sophia with pure malice. "You'll rue this disloyalty. You'll forfeit all, the home, the funds, all. You'll be naught sans me. I'd rather be naught than witness you harm my daughter," she replied, and for the first time in years she sounded like the resilient woman who'd reared Mia solo. The door shut behind officers and captive, leaving us 3 in my den. Sophia sank into a seat and commenced sobbing. Not the subdued, cautious tears before, but profound, gut-wrenching cries from years of interred agony. Mia went to her, promptly kneeling beside. "Mom, it's fine. It's concluded now." "I'm so remorseful," she whispered through tears. "I should have shielded you. I should have been stronger." "You were strong tonight," I said, settling back by the hearth. "When it counted most, you chose your daughter over your husband. That required true valor." The fire popped serenely in the grate, and for the first time in months my abode felt a true home again. Not just because my kin was secure, but because truth had been uttered and justice served. Mia looked up from beside her mother's seat. "What now, Grandpa?" "Now we mend," I said simply. "We take time and we mend." 6 months later, the afternoon light poured through my kitchen pane as Sophia turned waffles on the skillet, and Mia sat at the counter perusing her admission from Michigan State's design program. "Full grant," she said for the 12th time that month, still incredulous. They're paying for my education. That's what transpires when you're gifted and diligent, Sophia said, plating waffles. She appeared altered now, more robust assured. The halftime role at the community center had granted independence she'd lacked, and the separation agreement provided sufficient for fresh starts. Your grandmother would have beamed with pride, I said, easing into my seat with tea. The kitchen buzzed in a way absent since Evelyn's passing, brimming with talk and giggles and the warm disorder of true kin. Sophia had relocated permanently post Victor's sentencing. The spare became her domain, and we'd transformed the lower level into a proper retreat for Mia. Not a penalty space like at Victor's, but a cozy haven with solid warmth and panes that opened freely. Dad's certain you don't mind our indefinite stay, Sophia asked, joining us. I know you value solitude. Solitude is exaggerated, I replied, intending every bit. Kin matters. Besides, who else ensures Mia doesn't scorch the kitchen attempting cuisine? That was once Mia protested, chuckling, and the blaze was tiny. The phone rang and Sophia answered. Ellis home. Oh, hello, Alex. Yes, she's here. Piano session at 5. Sure, I'll inform. She disconnected and turned. Your pal Alex wonders if you're still set for session toward the recital. The recital, I arched a brow. You omitted mentioning any recital. Mia beamed, resembling the self-assured young woman she ought to be. It's minor. Alex and I are performing a duet. Few folk pieces you'd likely know. I'll front row, I vowed. Post-meal, I found Sophia in the den organizing fresh kin images on the shelf beside Evelyn's portraits. One from Mia's secondary completion we'd missed amid Victor turmoil, one from our recent hike, and one from New Year's morn, our first genuine kin New Year in ages. Any update from Victor, I queried, unsure I desired knowledge. His counsel rang yesterday. The therapy for anger is progressing well, supposedly, but he forfeited his position at the warehouse. She's relocating to Detroit with his brother. Good. Distance benefits. I pity him occasionally, she confessed. But then I recall what he did to Mia, and the sentiment fades swiftly. That evening, while Mia attended piano, Sophia and I tended the yard prepping soil for Evelyn's flower bed. Summer approached early this year, and there was optimism in sowing and anticipating bloom. Dad, Sophia said, weeding with intent, I must thank you again for your actions. If you hadn't arrived that day, you needn't thank, I said, overturning stubborn dirt. I merely did what any grandfather would. No, you didn't. You hazarded all to rescue her. You could have faced arrest abduction charges, but I didn't. Truth prevails ultimately. She grinned, brushing soil from palms. Evelyn used to say that. She was wise, wiser than me anyhow. That night we fell into routine, supper jointly followed by whatever documentary or film aired. It wasn't thrilling or opulent, but it was what we required. Steady, serene, secure. Mia had her piano out softly rehearsing in the nook while Sophia tackled a puzzle and I perused the journal. Ordinary kin pursuits that seemed unattainable months prior. Grandpa Mia said during an ad, I've pondered switching focus. From design to what psychology, perhaps therapy. She set her piano and regarded me earnestly. I want to aid other youths enduring what I did. I felt pride so intense it nearly stole my breath. This young woman, with every right to bitterness, sought to channel her ordeal to assist others. That's noble aim, I said. Your grandmother always said healing pain best by aiding others evade it. Did she truly say that? She did amid myriad wisdoms I should have heeded closer. As night progressed and Sophia napped in her seat, Mia and I stepped to the rear deck for stars. The evening was crisp and clear, but not like that dreadful Christmas Eve when I'd found her icing on Victor's step. Eager for hiking season? I asked. Can't await. Think we'll spot more than last. With your fortune, probably a herd. We stood in eased quiet, two Ellis generations who'd rediscovered each other via crisis and truth. In months, Mia would depart for college, eventually forging her life and kin. But the base was firm now, erected on candor and safeguard and love that demands not back. Grandpa, Mia said as we re-entered. Yeah. Thank you for retrieving me. Thank you for being worth rescue. The abode was warm and luminous as we secured for night. Three souls who'd learned kin isn't merely blood. It's appearing when crucial, uttering truth when arduous, and shielding loved ones regardless cost. Evelyn would have been proud of us all. If you enjoyed this tale, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. To hear the next tale, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.